if you're encountering outsiders on the internet from quite a young age? Was that normal?
It's not normal. I was very insistent about it, and there wasn't really much to stop me, I would say.
Okay, are you going to interview Chelsea Handler about motherhood next? Oh, that is so savage!
I know. Can't keep quiet when you start a riot.
We like Louise Perry. Tikla and I are always like, we are fans.
Mormons believe some weird stuff, but like it works.
And I realized some of this high demand stuff that we're doing is actually scheduled stillness.
You know, families are made in different shapes and sizes, yes. But someone still does have to have the kids. Man, the standards are low. Just getting married and having kids makes you a trad con now?
There's nothing in the Bible or the Quran that is as weird as these secularist P. Diddy parties.
Mormonism has been much more successful at retaining people.
Mormonism catches up to trends in the broader United States about 30, 40 years late, and
we're doing it again as members. We run ourselves in circles to try and give these liars grace.
I call the midlife crisis feminist.
Louise Perry, we're huge fans of yours. Just not quite sure that that last casting decision hit the mark. All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description. Tikla, you've wanted to, I don't want to say debunk, but push back on some things that were said on Louise Perry's podcast recently. I believe we're titling this episode, Dear Louise Perry, please talk to us, not just about us, especially with people that hate us. Is that what's going on?
Yes. Okay. So Louise Perry, just a little background in case some of our viewers aren't familiar with her, though many probably are, because she's in this kind of dark web circle of intellectuals who are trying to make change in directions I think are really positive. So she's a British journalist, author, and campaigner, I guess you could say. And she talks a lot about motherhood and fertility and sexual politics. And she's kind of trying to reclaim feminism. So she recognizes that it's gone wrong in leaving most of women behind and not serving their best interests, but she's attempting to reclaim it by including the needs and hopes and dreams of all women, not just masculine women.
All right.
And so I think what she's doing is really cool. And I think a lot of Latter-day Saint women resonate with what she's doing or would if they knew of her. However, back a little bit further. So, and she's been referencing the church a little bit in interviews where she'll kind of joke about how, if trends continue the way they've been, the only people left are going to be Mormons and Orthodox Jews or something like that, right? She'll kind of like joke about that. So she's clearly curious about our group for like anthropological reasons.
Okay.
She's fascinated by how we've managed to hold on to a high fertility rate and such, so on and so on. So she has a podcast episode entitled Understanding Mormonism. So I'm all excited, right? I'm like,
okay,
this is so fun. She's going to get to learn more about our faith. She has on this nobody. Sorry, he's not nobody. I'm sure he's great.
I just want to preface, anyone who goes to watch this episode, you're going to want to punch this guy in the face.
Okay.
So condescending, and he has the audacity to be an ex-Mormon gay man who decides that he's going to speak for Mormon women. And I'm just like, how in the world are you? I mean, she's wonderful. Like, I really, Tikla and I are both aligned in the sense that, like, you can be promoting wonderful ideas about womanhood and femininity without completely buying into everything in our religion. We really we love the ideas she's promoting. But what's interesting to me is that people will go to someone who has no reference point. Like he's a man who is attempting to explain the experience of Mormon women, and man, does he miss the mark. Like he misses the mark completely, in my opinion. So we're gonna attempt to fill maybe the gaps.
Well, okay, and here's what's so funny. What's so funny. When I finished the interview, I was like, once I realized he was actually a former member, he wasn't an active member, raised in the church, 7 generations of members in his family or what have you, are his credentials. and by the end of it, I was like, okay, for a former member, I mean, he represented us pretty well. And then I watched it again and I realized, how low is my bar
Like,
for how we're allowed to be represented in like popular mainstream media, that this was something I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. When like the whole thing was like this soggy word salad about like cult and high demand and insular and embedded and like
wait a
every
second.
day and-
Is this another anti-Mormon ex-member who has just figured out he can maximize damage and his activism against the church by ostensibly representing as, oh, I'm a member that you should talk to about Mormon issues. So all he can do is just drop bombs. Is he just doing the 1-2 John DeLynn shuffle?
I want to think the best of him. It looks like his other presence online is actually not anti-Mormon, nor does he give like an anti-Mormon vibe. Like he actually gave some grace, like he gave some credit where credit was due, but generally he was not answering the questions she was asking. He was answering the questions he wanted to answer. And so, but it does look like he has a life. Like he has the life outside of the identity of being a former member, which I have to give him credit for. So he's doing other things, and she must have had some connection to him, known he was a former member, and decided this was her guy.
Well, I got him on the screen right now, and girls, just take a look at your new representative right there.
Okay.
Your new mouthpiece. You know, Russell M. Alston, mouthpiece of God. It looks like Tracing Woodgrains is the mouthpiece of LDS women, apparently, huh?
We love you. I'm so sorry we have to do this to you, but you missed the mark completely.
I feel like if you're going to speak on, if you're going to represent a group of people, and that's one of the things that I think, Tikla and I have talked about, is it's very easy to castigate an entire group of women as oppressed when you're not talking to them. Like, I don't know anyone that would talk to Tikla or would talk to me directly and say, gosh, Rachel just seems like a really oppressed woman. In fact, they'd probably more be like the opposite. They'd be like, hey, Rach, like, tone it down. Like,
maybe simmer down a
we
little
got
bit, girlfriend.
It's much easier to characterize people as victims or as not agents of their own choice when you're not interacting with them directly. And that's what I think the power of WardRadio women is that you get people like me and Tikla and Megan and Brittany and Charlotte. We're all articulate, we're all educated. Obviously, I think highly of the women of WardRadio, but it's harder to reckon with those stereotypes that I think are wholly not factual when you're actually talking directly to a Mormon woman or an LDS woman. You're like, gosh, she really seems fine to me. Seems like she owns her choices.
Yeah. I mean, and okay, this was so fun though, because then I went to the comments like, okay, how are people reacting to this? And I've got them in the Discord.
Okay.
If you want to pull them up.
Oh, I see them right here.
50%. I went through and counted and did the math. Like 50% of the comments were along this line. So things like, okay, are you going to interview Chelsea Handler on motherhood next?
Oh, geez. Look at this one. The first one I see says, Louise, no one would do an interview called Understanding Gender Critical Feminism with an ex-gender critical feminist unless they had an anti-gender critical feminist agenda. Please consider what everyone is saying in the comments. The church is large with a diverse membership. Oh my gosh. Okay, are you going to interview Chelsea Handler about motherhood next? Oh, that is so savage.
I know. So I was like, okay, she's got to wake up to this. Like the comments are telling a totally different story for her already. And so maybe we can, help her out a little more and she can find an actual Latter-day Saint to come and talk to her. We're plentiful. I mean, she references
Latter-day Saint woman even to talk about womanhood.
Would be nice. That would be nice.
Answer her questions about like why we have such a highly educated generation of women who also want to be mothers and have kids.
Okay, Andrew.
Why are we setting records?
Andrew Cherpesky, 3180. Andrew, Andrew, you reach out on Ward Radio. I'm giving you a shirt. That is a savage comment right there.
Comment.
Okay,
So
are you
good.
going to interview Chelsea Handler about motherhood next? Okay, so do we have any timestamps, any clips we want to play that are smoking guns?
So, and there's more comments like this. Like, I mean, people were not happy with this, but very kind about it. Like, Louise, let's help you out. Like, you can do better than this. So yeah, let's jump right in. I tried to clip just some of the questions she asked him, and then we'll get into a little bit of his response, and then maybe be able to kind of like steer it the right direction and give some more insight. So the first one here is called Social Technologies.
Okay. And, is it a clip in the Discord or is it a...
Yeah, it's in a thread. No, same place as the comments.
Okay, Louise Perry, go.
Encourage people to stay within the church. What are the sort of social technologies that were used which allowed, 7 generations of your family to stay within this social niche?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of social technologies, I think one of the biggest ones is the strong emphasis in all of that, with it being your whole life, so especially in Utah, so intimately connected to every facet of your life. It's not just your belief. It's not just an abstract thing. It's every day you are around other people who believe the same things you do, who affirm these things, who tell you should be doing these things, who tell you should be thinking these things, or communicate in things other than words that you do. You grow up with the music of it. You grow up with every thought of yours really influenced in some way by it. Every aspect of your morality influenced in very deep running ways.
Huh.
All right. So we can stop there for a minute. So he kind of just goes along this vein. This is the drum he's beating the whole time, because he's just spent a whole bunch of time describing, like, they have the children repeat after you when they're saying scriptures. It's like brainwashing. Like, it's clearly like it's everywhere you go. My town was 97% members. We knew every house that wasn't a member. So he's painting this picture of like, we're just this little commune where nobody ever sees daylight outside of these little Mormon towns.
Or maybe it was just a nice neighborhood.
Right. But I mean, and then he's suggesting that the reason there's longevity, that families tend to pass this down to their children, and that the church is growing, is because we're just this cult, right? And we're all just brainwashed. And I thought, of all of the answers you could give to somebody who is scientifically minded, who's journalist minded, who wants to know, like, how do we spread what's good about this to the rest of the world? That's the answer you give? Like, okay. So it's just so boring. Anyway, so I wanted to answer this question actually for Louise. I don't know if, Rachel, you have any thoughts before I keep going.
I do,
about what is it about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that's sticky? That's the word she uses later, that has staying power, that keeps people in the fold generation after generation and invites people in, because so much of our growth is converts, people who were not raised in this, who did not grow up in the church, who joined later. And so any thoughts on that, Rachel, before I take it?
Yeah, I had a lot of profound thoughts about his perspective, and that I think it's interesting when you are a 7th generation member of the church, because in many ways it's like growing up wealthy. You don't actually know, if you grow up a kind of wealthy and you're only around wealthy people, you really don't know what you have, and you don't know what other people don't have. And where growing up, and he also brings up this, so by bringing up this element of, I grew up in Utah, 7 generations of Mormons, he's bringing that to the fore as like his street cred. Like, I know what I'm talking about. But I would argue you actually might not know what you're talking about, because you don't appreciate the amazing social infrastructure that the LDS lifestyle provides in Utah that the rest of the world does not have, and what a stark contrast. So one of the things that I would say was so compelling growing up in the East Coast, where a majority of the memberships, I grew up in New England, but now I live in North Carolina. The most powerful and potent motivation for people to join the church when it's growing up and is always the answers that we have about eternal families. Like, it's always that, because the church, and I have several members of my family who've left the church, and they will not join another church because no other religion can add to, okay, well, what happens to families after this life? Well, what happens to my child that died? What happens to my spouse that died that I loved? Like, what happens to my kids? Like, what's the point of living if I don't get to be with my family? And we're the only religion that says it's okay. God loves you because you're his child and he wants to be with you. And so he's also he gets it. He's made a way for you to be with your children. Like, that truth might not be scientific, but we are not just scientific beings. Like, we're emotional beings too. And I mean, from what I've seen in the East Coast, that's the thing that will motivate everyone to join the church, to get their temple recommends back, to overcome addictions, to repent, is to be with your family. So I don't know what your answer to her would have been.
Yeah, well, I think if I was speaking from a devotional point of view, it would be, well, God is speaking. A dispensation of time has been opened up, and there's scripture and there's prophets and all that. But if I'm talking like, what would Louise Perry care about? What is she interested in hearing? I would say it's our theology that has a story for Eve that is positive. Eve is a hero. She was brave. She was wise when she took the fruit, right? So baked into our story in LDS, in Latter-day Saint theology, is that Eve was good and she made the right choice on behalf of humanity. That's huge for women in the church. And then you couple that with the story or the reality that we have a doctrine of a heavenly mother who is co-eternal with Heavenly Father. So now we have the union of man and woman in marriage as the highest, as king, as royalty, right? As king and queen, priest and priestess now. And then we have the family as the eternal union, right? And so all of this baked into taking something mundane like family life, something everyday, something that lots of people do. And it's, is it that big of a deal that you just had a family? It's now the pinnacle of godhood and like, it is the ultimate thing to strive for. And so now it has status. It has clout. It's valued. And so if you're in a culture that values that, and she knows this, but you can't get it, you're not going to get it in a roundabout way. You have to get it from the story. You have to get it in the actual belief system for it to be for it to work. Because in these other countries where they've tried to incentivize fertility, it doesn't work. It all flops. People don't go for the government, credit. And in one of her recent podcasts, she had someone on who was talking about the role of kind of like this notoriety associated with fertility being an element in the state of, or in the country of Georgia, where the head of the Orthodox Church said that he would personally bless any children that were born within a certain amount of time. And the fertility rate skyrocketed.
Wow.
And so it's kind of pointing out this element of if there's something, there's a support involved, there's a clout, and there's kind of this, that's the word I'm looking for. This
status.
Yes, status. That's the word I'm looking for. Status associated with family life.
Okay.
What's that?
Or an incentive. Like that's a social incentive, right?
Yeah. And
I think it really though is like a social status, like in the same way that and I have in the past paralleled it to the military or like a priest. Like there used to be like a special status associated with like service to your country.
That's right. You've talked about this.
And once we stopped like valuing social, like once we lost social currency, and honestly, I don't think it's widespread in the United States. I think it's pockets where like the social currency of being a mother was lost or debased. Those communities stopped having kids, and they have never been able to get those same women or those women's children to have more than one or two kids. And then one of the critiques with this young guy is that he brings up this idea of like, LDS culture and religion like permeates every part of your life. And I was like, well, that's a very closed-minded view, because if you go globally, the only two other cultures with growing fertility rates are the Hasidic Jewish population and the Muslim population. And those are religions, Abrahamic religions, that are also in fertility increase, that have a belief system that permeates every part of their life, every part of daily life and family life. And it's a way of expressing your values in a daily way. So I was like, he thinks it's unique that a religion would be part of your life. And I'm like, well, the strongest Abrahamic religions in the world right now that are going to survive, like when you look at the next generation globally of kids on the world, it's Muslims, it's Mormons, it's the Amish. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Louise knows this. She knows this. That's why she's so curious about us.
Yeah.
And so I think, well, let's play another clip. We could go forever on this. There's so many things we could say.
Well, also, I'm going to chime in here just for 1 second. Anti-Mormon rule, what is it? I think it's number 8, is that they always, anti-Mormons always conflate Utah-isms with Mormon-isms.
Right.
And
for what it's worth, I'm not in Utah. I've lived most of my life outside of Utah.
It's a very good point.
I am so sick and tired of these spoiled, just like you say, Rachel, spoiled by the great society that freaking Brigham Young created. You've got these Utahns that are spoiled rotten, and they always want to make you feel guilty for their wholesome upbringing. I think that's anti-Mormon rule number 11, is they're always apologizing and trying to make them feel guilty for their wholesome upbringing. And so it's like, look, sure, I know like any good system, there's bad apples. Mormons, we're not perfect, all right? But I'm really sick and tired of Utahns just working out their daddy issues on the public sphere, talking to me. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry, just whoever this ex-member gay man is, you don't speak for just Mormon women, maybe for Utahn people working out their daddy issues, but like you do not speak for me, like at all.
Well, and
you do not speak for my wife.
He's speaking for himself. So I'll grant him that. He never pretended to be speaking for the church. He just is speaking from his own experience. I just think his experience is a little bit limited. And that's fair. I mean,
one thing, and this is like a side note that I was fascinated by with his, and you can cut this out if you want, is because I've seen this, is he speaks to the unique problematic path of someone who considers themselves intellectual. Like he definitely
we're going to get to that. We are going to get to that.
Like in the LDS church.
The article that he cites later. Okay. I've got so much to say when we get to that clip. Let's do the next one, and then we'll skip through some of these kind of fast because they're going to be quick.
Okay.
Let's skip down to weird stuff, but it works.
Okay, so weird stuff, but it works. Boy, that could go one in a million ways. But okay, so there's social technologies, more sticky, insular culture, weird stuff, but it works. Okay, so here we go.
We might get back to some of those other ones.
Okay.
But when it comes to a different ideology, being nonconformist is tough. You can see why most people aren't. It's not a choice. It's just, I think it's a personality trait, mostly, but, it not only makes for an easier life, but I think it also probably makes for much healthier communities. I mean, Mormonism, Mormons believe some weird stuff, but like it works. It's a flourishing community in all the important ways.
It does, and in many of the important ways it is. Yes, absolutely. And
but when it comes to different,
okay, so there, just ended.
So yeah, so he described himself as
he didn't seem too happy about having to admit that, dude.
She clearly thinks that conformity is actually going to be a social good, right? And so when he's describing himself as a nonconformist,
by the way, weird stuff, Tikla? I'm tired of being told I believe in weird stuff. These are the idiots that believe 6 feet would stop, or 2 weeks to stop the spread, and then shut us down for 3 years. These are the people that thought like T-shirts rolled up. Do you remember when the Attorney General said that
these are not those people, Jordan. These are not those people.
T-shirts will stop the zombie apocalypse.
You know what I always say is like, actually credit to my husband. He was talking to someone in the area who was like Christian and his wife's Mormon, and And he was like, dude, you believe that Jesus walked on water. Like, you're already in the boat. Like, you
Well, that's what I
already
was
believe.
gonna say. That was what I was
You
gonna say.
already believe. If you're a Christian, you already believe some pretty
But
fantastic
I'm not even
stuff.
talking about the
You're
Christians,
just used
Rachel.
to it.
I'm not even talking about the Christians. I'm talking about the secularists. They look at us like we're weirdos for polygamy. Because one guy had like 3 wives and one was 65 that was assigned to him because she had just been widowed by a guy that died in the Mormon battalion. Oh, we're the weirdos. And then they plug in an album by some rapper who's going to a club with like 17 women. They worship like, you
or
know.
even the academics, right, who have a graduation ceremony that they work for years for, where they wear a funny hat
Yes.
and they walk down the, and they
That's
have
a great
somebody give them a
point.
diploma.
I
right?
love
so
that.
we have these cultural rituals that are very helpful. They're very helpful. And the only reason that our religion is weird, quote unquote weird, is because our appearances of angels, our artifacts, our all of these things that are in the Bible, they're biblical, they're religious, happened in America. They happened locally. Just like,
But what's so
I don't
crazy
know.
about that is like, that's part of the story of Judaism, and that's part of the story of Islam.
Every one of these secularists.
That's like a major feature of every major Abrahamic religion. Every single one.
I'm not even talking about the Abrahamic religions, though, that are rational. These people created P. Diddy. There's nothing in the Bible or the Quran that is as weird as these secularist P. Diddy parties.
Okay, so
P.
this is
Diddy,
one thing
is that what you said?
Yeah, P.
What I
Diddy.
think is so interesting, Cardin, about like, and this is where Louise Perry is so interesting, is because the thread that she's pulling on, and that's why I tend to look at it as well, is like when you pull on that thread of fertility rates, because it's like one of those like delineations in the sand, is like what happens to secularists always. What always happens with secularist women and secularist men?
It tanks your birth rate.
Birth rate, marriage rate, tanks. It always tanks. But like we mock these funny weirdo, traditional religionists. They're the only religions. That's why I love, like in the Book of Mormon, it's like the traditions of our fathers. Like we're the only ones who are holding on to these. And like you said earlier, Tikla, like, how low are my standards? Like I've never, like, living through the last days, I'm like, man, the standards are low. Just getting married and having kids makes you a trad con now. Like that's literally it. Like I saw this girl on, I should show it to you, like this, and I can send it to you, Tikla, like this girl on Instagram who's more of like a foodie, liberal social influencer, very, very like feministy, in her early 30s. She's like, I got attacked. I said that I want to get married and have children, and that does not make you liberal. Like her just saying, I want to someday get married and have children doesn't make, she's like, I can be liberal and want those things, because there's like this, the secularism has put so much pressure on these girls who are liberal or identify as liberal, that they feel like they can't even confidently say, like, I'd like to get married and have a child. Like, it's interesting how I started seeing that. I never used to see that growing up in a liberal community. I never used to see, like, my liberal friends not want to get married at all or not want to have kids at all. But the pressure for secularists has gone that direction.
That's so interesting. So who believes in weird things now, huh?
Oh, dude, for real, man. Those people with the attorney general, roll up the T-shirts, tie it up, and they look like children in costumes for Halloween in 1996. And we're supposed to believe that we are the ones with weird beliefs. It's like, I don't know. I can't, these people.
We have some incredibly fantastic spiritual, like if Christianity is true, if there really was a Savior, Jesus Christ, who was born on the earth and who asked something of those who followed him, then that is something that should change your life. It should inspire you to consecrate everything that you are to him. And so when it says, if we say this is a part of our everyday life, it means Jesus Christ is a part of our everyday life. And the words Jesus Christ were shockingly absent from this entire podcast.
Wow.
I think that they said the name Jesus Christ maybe once, and then the second time was in her commercial.
Oh, interesting.
Something she was promoting.
That's really
that is the
interesting.
entire church. So you're clearly missing some things.
Okay, no, but by the way,
he does talk about Joseph Smith, though. Sorry, Cardin.
Yeah, he does.
Well, I know. I was just going to say, literally, I was a physics major before graduating in Spanish literature and poetry. You can imagine the enthusiasm of my mother when I told her that one. All right. But anyway, the seculars believe in crazy, wild, kooky stuff too. Have you ever heard, I don't know if you know this, but they think we're stupid for saying God created the heavens and the earth, right? And they say, oh, no, it was the Big Bang over millions and millions of years, right? Well, the problem is, the Big Bang models don't work unless you admit that in the first moments of the Big Bang, I'm not kidding you, look this up in physics textbooks, that all the laws of physics cease to work momentarily. Literally. Yeah. You're not allowed to believe in the Virgin Mary, but you can believe in the virgin birth of the universe. Not the virgin birth of Jesus, but the virgin birth of the universe. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called like Planck's epoch or Planck's conundrum or whatever it's called. But go look it up. It's called the Planck epoch, I think it is. And no joke, all the scientists that want to finger wag at you and say you're a dumb Christian for believing in the virgin birth literally say, well, don't worry, miracles don't exist, except for this miraculous time when all the laws of physics cease to exist. Now go put on your mask and be like, they have their own catechisms.
Push back a little bit. We in the Church of Jesus Christ do not have to separate scientific truth and religious truth. We're one of the few religions that, at least that I know of, that find them completely compatible. Ultimately, if it's true, actually true scientifically and actually true spiritually, it will align.
No, of course it will. I'm just saying, when Louise Perry says, well, they believe some pretty weird things, what?
Yes, of course.
Like what? Like what's so weird? Like about fasting once a month? I have to listen to people say that we're weirdos for fasting once a month, and then now all you see on all these podcasts Louise Perry goes on is, well, have you heard about intermittent fasting? And then they get these doctors talking about how, oh, well, the ketones and the this and the that. It's like, bruh. Like, there's a reason we live 14% longer. This is something
interesting that's happening, I think, Tikla, with the topic of motherhood and marriage, because Tikla and I, as millennials, have lived through the era of like mother shaming almost. We're like, oh, those silly women selling out for getting married young. Louise Perry is trying to promote this idea of like appreciating motherhood and womanhood that way. But what's interesting is like, now that we're in this fertility crisis in America and globally, we're also in this marriage crisis. This really interesting book. You mentioned, Cardin, like how this guy who grew up in Utah is kind of entitled and spoiled because he just doesn't even appreciate.
Mayberry. Yeah,
he just doesn't even appreciate how much social stability having 60% of his community as married people brings to his life. Like, there's a book that was published by the Washington Institute, really good. I've talked about it. It was originally called The Two-Parent Advantage, and she was an economics professor. She had to change it to the two-parent. Yeah. And her whole thing, which to the ire and frustration of all of her, colleagues in academia, is finding that, how do we help these? And I think they were looking at like racial minorities as well, immigrant minority, like how do we help impoverished groups of people have better mental health? How do we have these children have better outcomes? And all of her data showed having two people stay married helps everybody.
Dude, I grew up in
helps the children, helps everyone, helps the whole community, helps school, helps bottom line financial advantage. And in Utah, it's like the norm to stay married. So just having that one factor, don't even get me as someone who comes from like two family trees of alcoholism. Like sadly, I went to a funeral out in Utah, and it was an alcohol related death. And I remember like most of the people at the funeral were not LDS or were ex-LDS, kind of like this young man. And I know that they had a kind of arrogance to themselves about like, oh, I'm not LDS, I drink, blah, blah, blah. And I remember looking at all of them just being like, I know so much about the tragedies of alcohol. And you have no idea because you're like the first person in your family tree to ever just drink. Like, you don't know what domestic violence happens from alcohol use. You don't know what kind of divorces emerge from alcohol abuse because no one in your family has ever drunk alcohol. You have no idea the structured stability that has emerged from just those two things I mentioned, just marriage and just staying away from alcohol. You know what I mean? So there's a naivete that I think comes to people who've only seen, you could say, like, emotional wealth.
When I hear these people complain, when I hear these Utahns complain about their upbringings, I just think, dude, I grew up in Los Angeles. 95% of the kids on 95% of the blocks in LA County would give a limb to grow up on the average block of whatever city or town he grew up in. All right. I mean, there's a reason why there's no NCIS Salt Lake City. All right. You know what I'm saying? There's a reason why it's like NCIS.
There might be.
Oh, and it's just going to be a bunch of swingers committing violent domestic crimes.
In Salt Lake, it's coming.
Yeah, sure.
They might be in for a rude awakening. We have a few friends who are cops in Salt Lake, and they're like, they treat, like, some of these people are basically pushing for Salt Lake to become like a sanctuary city. Like, they're gonna start. Maybe
I shouldn't say Salt Lake. Guarantee, dude, this guy isn't from some tough neighborhood in Salt Lake. Guarantee it's some suburb, where his mom asked the toughest question he had in the morning with his mom asking whether he wanted his peanut butter and jelly sandwich cut from corner to corner or straight down the middle. So,
okay, he does not bag on his upbringing. Apart from calling it a cult. Okay, maybe he does a little bit.
Go to the intellectualism part, though.
Sure. All right. We'll go to the.
So let's get to the clip that's entitled "Internet." This is cringy.
Oh no, is it? Okay.
Yeah. When you listen to this, everyone who listens to this clip is just going to be like, "Wait,
what?
Wait,
okay,
wait."
Oh, can I just guess? I haven't seen these.
What are we talking about?
You girls have seen these, and I'm the only one that's guessing here. Of course,
that's probably raw reaction, Cardin.
Well, let me guess. He says Mormonism was able to keep the lid on its cult until
it's worse.
The internet, and then they couldn't keep the lies in the bag, and all of us brave Gen Xers were just coming out with all of this new information that had been hidden by the church. Never mind, they were lazy learners that slept through every single Sunday school and every single seminary class their dutiful parents tried to send them to. Is that what's going on or no?
Oh, it's worse. Go ahead.
It can get worse. Wow. Okay. I'm clicking it up right now.
And it's very, very easy to retrench in that. Very easy to retrench based on that sort of reaction.
Obviously, lots of things banned within Mormonism. The internet, though.
Wait, pause. I forgot about that. Where we have to
banned?
We have to address that.
Banned?
Lots of things banned in Mormonism.
We bought the book View of the Hebrews and published it for free. We don't charge a single.
She's talking about coffee and tea and like sleeveless things and, like all the litany of things that we have to do to go to the temple or whatever. These banned things. And here's what I say to this. If you were studying with some wise shaman in the East and he wanted to take you up to this spiritual place, this temple in the mountains, and he said, okay, before we go, I want you to train. I want you to fast. I want you to meditate. I want you to put on this special garb and then ascend to this place of spirituality and holiness, and we will have an experience here. No one would bat an eye that there would be things to do in preparation to be in a holy space. That is what the temple requirements are. They are preparation to be in a holy place. That's all it is. Nothing's being banned. You can do whatever you want as a member of the church. But if you want to be in a sacred place, it's intended for us to prepare to be there. That is what this is all about, to prepare to open our minds to more spirituality. So if there's something that will interfere with that spiritual state of being, then we try to avoid it because we've learned that it's not serving us.
This is all volunteer.
It has nothing to do with being banned.
You're so beautiful. That was so beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Okay, now here's my last question before I finish playing the rest of the clip. How did she choose this guy? Like, what's his credentials? Was he just
that's the critique of the whole, like, I think she comes to this with an honest curiosity, but that's the critique of the whole interview is why is this guy speaking for Mormonism when he's not Mormon anymore?
Nor does he seem to have thought critically about it. in order
And
to.
he looks like he's 22.
Well, I mean, he
You know what I
could
mean?
be
He doesn't
young.
look like he has a whole lot of life experience where he's just like, I don't know.
She must have had a friend who had a friend.
Yeah.
Oh, sure,
So I think
maybe.
that's, you know, we want Louise. Tikla and I are such a fan. Invite Tikla on your show.
Oh,
She
goodness.
is articulate. She's been a member her whole life. She will give you an honest 360-degree view of LDS women who are educated, make choices on their own. You know, I that's my pitch. That's my pitch, Louise.
Okay.
You're really
on your
sweet.
show.
Well, here we
Finish
go.
the clip. Finish
Here
the clip.
we go. I'm rolling it back 5 seconds. Tracing wood grains, go.
To retrench based on that sort of reaction.
Obviously, lots of things banned within Mormonism. The internet, though, what's the attitude towards the internet? If you're encountering outsiders on the internet from quite a young age, was that normal?
It's not normal. I was very insistent about it, and there wasn't really anything my family could do to stop me. I would say I have always been fascinated with computers and always been fascinated with the world online. And as soon as I could get online and start looking around, I did get online and start looking around. And it's not a typical Mormon, and it.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I had a unique childhood as a Mormon because I
got
looked
on the internet.
I got on the internet. Okay, now look.
So I was a very unique unorthodox Mormon because I got on the internet.
Oh, you couldn't stop me from DSL dial-up in America Online, man. Like, please, brother.
It's so funny.
Okay, now look, I would say in America, amongst religious groups, unfortunately our church included, boomers were very reluctant to adopt the internet because their lives didn't require it like young people were. And so I think there was a generational divide in America as a whole. But there was never any kind of codified, oh, don't go on the internet. What?
What was the
Half
divide?
the Mormons invented this internet tech. Did you, like, literally, the patents of my okay,
Microsoft
so my
Word,
aunt's, my aunt's father invented the hard drive.
Wow.
Like, the owner of Mormoner was a tech bro that sold his company for buku cash. All right, like Mormons
the
have their
inventor of the
fingerprints.
television was a member.
Yes, like Mormons could never outlaw the internet because they've made half of it. You know? Like, it's just what
The only thing I could think
them and
of
Al Gore.
where did she get this, right? Because she knows, like, Mitt Romney was a Mormon. Like, do you think he just, like, didn't look at the internet? You're just like, there was this, like,
These people
notebook,
aren't
like-
smart.
So what's weird too is this interview is only I had to look up the date. I was like, was this a couple years ago? I'm like, no,
No,
this is
3 months ago.
So like that, Real Housewives of Mormon Wives has been out. Like this isn't just like a time where
Well, I
people
think
are
she
like,
must just be mixing
Mormons
us up
aren't
with
just
the
these
Amish
polygamists? Like,
or like
yeah.
the
I was
fundamentalists
like,
or something. Like, what is happening? The only thing I could think of
maybe that's
was the caution that I think a lot of Latter-day Saint parents, maybe more than others, give to young children about avoiding pornography online on the internet. That's the only thing I could think of.
But we're
It's even
doing it again.
close.
We're doing it again as members. We run ourselves in circles to try and give these liars grace. Like, at what point do we just like literally, a guy could come out tomorrow and say like, oh, I saw that guy ripping the intestines out of a pig and eating it like a bloodthirsty zombie. And we'd all be like, oh, well, maybe he was talking about this one brother who does have a gastrointestinal problem.
What do you think the reaction should be, Cardin? Like, what do you think your reaction should be to someone who gets it wrong like that? Like,
full cancellation, no redemption, all hands on deck, Reddit brigade. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, there's more about the internet and intellectuals.
Okay,
Let's
cool.
go to internet, intellectuals, feminists, LGBTQ.
Okay, so I'm
This is
jumping on clip number 4. Internet, intellectuals, feminists, and LGBTQ. Louise Perry and Tracy
Do you think you
Woodgrains,
would have
go.
left the church if you hadn't had access to the internet?
Wait, oh my gosh. I got to play that one again. Hold on.
Do you think you would have left the church if you hadn't had access to the internet?
Okay, by the way, I just have to say, dude, Louise Perry needs to do some ASMR. Like, she just made
She's got a great voice.
Yeah,
huh?
she just made some threatening questions sound like I would pay money for that. Like, I would literally give her $100 to be like, You've reached the phone number of Card and Ellis. To leave a
Can
message."
you please
You know?
intro the whole episode with that clip? That's so good.
The world could be coming to an end, and Louise Perry could be like, "The world is going to cease to exist in 30 seconds. But don't worry. Please buckle your seatbelts." And it's just like, I'd be like, "Oh, the world's ending, but there's a seatbelt here for me." Like that is like so funny. So, okay. So from the beginning, do you think you'd be a Mormon if you could touch the internet? Here we go.
Do you think you would have left the church if you hadn't had access to the internet?
I don't think I am the sort of personality that ever could have stayed in long term. And,
right then, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but right then, Louise Perry should have said, like, "All right, you're not the right person for this then." You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're not the right person for the internet. But anyway, we'll keep going. Sorry.
Do you think you would have left the church if you hadn't had access to the internet?
I don't think I am the sort of personality that ever could have stayed in long term. And the reason for that, so there was a Mormon apostle in the 1980s, Boyd K. Packer, who gave a speech that I think was really prescient from an ex-Mormon perspective, not in a way that flatters him as much as he would want it to be. But basically, he was talking about how the three major threats to Mormonism are so-called intellectuals, feminists, and the LGBT movement.
Okay, stop. Stop for a minute. Okay, so I had never heard of this talk before. He's, making it sound like it was this Hallmark talk.
I've heard of
it. It wasn't a talk. It was a quote.
Well, it was a talk. I went and I pursued it.
I've heard of this quote.
When I searched for it, everything that was coming up was ex-Mormon Reddit, like lots and lots of like anti people who have attached to this talk. It was actually in 93, not the date he gave it.
Though.
And it wasn't a general conference talk. It feels like muskets and
Trowels.
What's the trowels talk? It was given at BYU, Idaho, to faculty and student, like kind of in like a training meeting.
Uh-huh.
And the points that he make, it was not intellectualism as a threat to testimony. It was church academics who were trying to tell the apostles what to do. That was a threat. So nothing to do with intellectualism at large or becoming intellectual.
He's saying academics and academic intellectuals.
He's saying it's not
kind
a
of
good idea.
The elite ivory tower type.
Well, no, that Boyd K. Packer wasn't saying that. Boyd K. Packer was saying that the church academics who were trying to tell the apostles, so Latter-day Saint academics who were trying to tell the apostles how to do their job. That was not appropriate, was kind of the message. And then not that LGBTQ and feminism were going to be a threat to testimony, but that as we minister to those who are feeling marginalized, we need to be careful not to become activists for a cause that won't serve everyone. And then he gives examples of how to minister to people who are on the margins, examples of how the prophet ministers to the people who were not feeling like they were in the mainstream. It is an incredibly just thoughtful talk that was completely misconstrued by those who analyzed it after the fact. And it is not like something that we bring up often. Anyway, so it was very odd to me that he was misquoting so much of this talk in a way that makes it clear he didn't read the actual talk. He's only read commentary on this talk that makes it sound like we're threatened by feminism, intellectualism, and LGBTQ, when in fact, LGBTQ members of the church fare better in the church than outside of the church.
Yeah.
Latter-day Saint members are more educated and still faithful, as members become more educated, they become more faithful in our church, unlike any other. And feminism is generally something that's in its broken form is something that Louise Perry would agree with needed reforming in order to be, in alignment with human thriving. And so anyway, that just really bothered me that he's the one talk he's going to quote, he misquotes and misrepresents our entire church body as a result. So that was quite frustrating.
Well, he does say, this is actually one of the areas where I actually agreed with his insight, where he said, those three groups are going to struggle in their path in the church. And I was like, I mean, I've heard that quote, and I actually have to admit I'm one of those that hasn't read the whole talk. And I have to say, like, in my own anecdotal experience, like, people who identify in one of those categories, like, they see themselves as an intellectual or really smart or someone who just, like, craves to kind of think through things. I grew up in, like, that kind of the Ivy League Northeast. And so there were a lot of just brilliant people, but also thinkers. And I really saw a lot of people lose their faith. I also like
wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, but when you say a lot of people lose their faith because of intellectuals, like, the only reason why I'm having so much trouble swallowing this is it's like I grew up with all of the big brain Caltech guys at JPL, the literal rocket scientists. They were my bishops, they were my stake presidents, they were my young men leaders. And I'm sick and tired of the so-called pseudo armchair internet Reddit intellectuals that think they're smart just because their parents sacrificed enough money and time to get them through a state college or get them through BYU. And they all of a sudden think they're all big brain and smart and too intellectual for the church. Meanwhile, I go to Sunday school where the dude that designed the arm on the Mars rover is literally telling me, oh yes, there is a God, and here's how the atonement works, and here's how X, Y, or Z thing can help you, and why patience pays off, and all this other stuff. And then I got to cue in on Homeboy here, saying how, like, oh, well, I'm too intellectual for this faith. It's like, I'm sorry, dog. If the dude that made the feet on the lunar lander and the chick that designed the arm that's picking up those little Mars rocks and dumping in whatever tank Elon Musk is going to look at 2 weeks from now, all right, if those people can tell me this all works and you're not stupid if you believe, then I don't think this cat has anything on those cats. And I'm tired of them patting themselves on the back saying, oh, I'm so intellectual. I'm so intellectual. I can't be a Mormon.
That's one of the things that I've noticed is, like, it's people that pride themselves in being intellectual. It's people that, that they want also... So it's those groups, the people who really either mostly have compassion for the LGBTQ groups, and the girls that are just like girls and midlife. I call them midlife crisis feminists. Those three groups are actually the groups of people that I have seen in my life who have really, they have a very acrimonious relationship with not just the church, but the actual gospel. And to the point where it's like they stop having a personal relationship with the gospel, the doctrines, the principles, and they just start having this acrimonious relationship with the church institution, where it's like, those are separate things. Like, your experience with the spirituality of the gospel and the principles and the truths are like inside your soul, whereas you just have to see yourself. And that's where this young man, but I've seen that. Like, I've seen this kind of like have to see myself as this just like critical thinker and very close family members, and they just are like so skeptical that they like can't have a spiritual, I don't know, those that was me. Just, I don't know what you thought about that.
Well, I think getting under, so two things. One, it may very well be that those three groups do have some friction with the church in general, but that's not what the talk was saying. So that's an independent statement from the talk that he's trying to reference. But also, I think it isn't necessarily it's kind of the culture surrounding those three things more than those three things. Intellectualism itself is not going to be at odds with the gospel. The culture of academia can be very anti-religion. And so that can be a bullying pressure to leave what you believe, not because you use your intellect to work your way out of religion, but because the pressure of the culture you're surrounded by is bullying you out of it. And I think that's the same with LGBTQ members, where being LGBTQ or same-sex attracted does not put you in conflict with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But the culture of LGBTQ activism right now can be in conflict with the church. And then the same with feminism. If you have a drive to be an outspoken, bold, educated, and equal woman, yes, then you are not at odds with the gospel or the church. But the culture of feminism right now can be at odds with it. So that's the only qualifier I'd put on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that were...
It's a great answer.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that were log cabin Republicans that said coming out as a Christian to their gay friends was harder than coming out as a gay man to their Christian family members. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know that was a lot of math to do really fast. But
Sorry,
anyway,
you cut my head, like,
also,
no, I
Rachel,
heard that.
killer use of the word acrimonious. That was, I was like, whoo. I feel like I'm in a spelling bee, that was awesome, man. So
thanks for that.
what's another, what's the last clip? Or there's two more. Okay.
There's two more we could go back to, or do we want to wrap up, or do we want to?
No, let's keep going. Both barrels.
So this one's kind of interesting. Insular culture forged in opposition to American culture.
Okay, so we're going to take insular culture.
Oh, was this the kind of I liked this. I don't know. I thought this was interesting.
Okay, we'll check
Yeah,
this
I'll
one
see what you have to
Of
say.
this early marginalization, and it seems to be there's a sort of frontier culture almost, right? Not only obviously going out into a hostile desert environment functions as a frontier, but also in terms of being in opposition to wider American society on things like polygamy. Do you think that might have forged a more insular religion?
Yeah, I definitely think it had a role to play in it. You see this with a lot of early movements. You see some leader who is going to be wildly controversial and wildly inventive and does some clever things and a lot of really out there things and gathers a group around them. And Joseph Smith is one of the most interesting figures in American history in that regard. That man's biography is like no other in terms of how full of a life he lived, in and out of prison, getting tarred and feathered constantly.
Of this early marginalization.
Okay.
I'll go.
Early marginalization. We had to keep fleeing west until they stopped killing us. And they didn't stop killing us until we found a spot with almost no more people. So, it's the early marginalization. No, this wasn't the fat kid in dodgeball getting picked last. Okay. This was murder. They're not human. They drew us in political cartoons and in newspapers as a completely different race. They used the same psychology that justified slavery in the South and kicking out the American Indians to the worst plots of land that they could find. They used that same logic against Mormons. They tried to measure our skulls and say that we were less human because, you don't believe in the creeds? Like, are you kidding me? I don't know if I'd say that this is just some kind of happy Bob Ross accident that happened from marginalization in the 1800s. It was murder.
What were you going to say, Rachel?
Yeah. If I had been in the interview, I would actually have said, the question itself is false. We actually aren't an insular religion at all. We are a global, what are you talking about? We have had the most global growth, non-violent growth globally. And I know I have a lot of appreciation for Islam. I've lived there, I've studied it, right? But there's a lot of violence involved in the growth of Islam. Zero, the growth of the gospel of Jesus Christ has happened in a very short period of time. And it's global, to the point where during COVID, there were more members outside of the United States than inside of the United States. And that's why I do get frustrated when there are talks in General Conference that are directed specifically to Utah Mormons. There was one talk basically be nice to people in Utah where I'm like, we're a global church now. What does this have to do with kids in Uganda or China? My husband and I were lucky enough to get to go to Japan recently. And it was so neat because they are in a fertility crisis in Japan. And it's so sad because what a culture. Oh my gosh, Japan has such a cool culture and they are in a fertility nosedive. So we found the Tokyo Japan temple and I was emotional. The first time all week that I had seen a family with more than 2 kids, there's this tiny little young, Japanese mom with her 4. Having 4 kids in Japan is like having 10 kids. Her 4 kids. And I was like, this is the kind of culture, this is the kind of religion that celebrates cultures and preserves them. You know, like I called my friend Elisa, shout out to Elisa, who's also Japanese American, and she's had 4 kids. I'm like, you're doing the best thing for your culture that anyone could do. And yet in their culture, they really have, like we referred to earlier, they have removed the social currency of being a mother from value. And that's why they can't get the younger generation of Japanese young women to have kids. So that's my pushback, is like, I don't know if I would even answer the question, because I'd be like, the question's false.
Right.
It's not an insular church. It's global.
We are absolutely everywhere. Members of the church are everywhere. They're on the they're Times bestseller list as authors. They're running for president. They're CEOs of companies. They're in your world and you don't even know, because we're just part of everywhere. We're not hiding away in our little commune somewhere. Okay. So this line of thinking and asking questions, it just shows she doesn't know. She doesn't know what it is.
You probably know Mormons. You probably are friends with Mormons in your little town.
You just don't.
And you're like, what?
She references Brad Wilcox a ton in her work, and probably not even realizing that he's now the general young men's presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he's like a top family scholar. And so often people are like the author of the book Essentialism, which was a super groundbreaking. Anyway, there's just so many members of the church who aren't posing as representatives of the church, so you don't realize they're there. But we're not insular. We support each other. We have structure to help each other, but we're everywhere. We're in your world.
Are you talking about Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less?
Yeah.
By Greg McKeown. I've never even heard of this book, but here it is right here. All right.
Yeah, he's a member. It was kind of cool. You get to like halfway through the book and he's talking about the power of reading ancient books at first thing in the morning. And he lists a bunch of books you could choose from. And he adds the Book of Mormon. And I was like, wait a minute.
He obviously doesn't have to get kids ready for school in the morning. He's not on the school run.
Oh, that's too funny.
So good.
Dude, I'll have to read this one.
Louise Perry, while there might have been some unity formed by opposition in the beginning in the church, and some now, I mean, we still have some opposition. The leaving of our homes, our ancestors' homes, was in part because we were too friendly to those who didn't like, or those who were anti-slavery and with the slaves. When our neighbors got mad at us for that, we were proclaiming that the heavens were open, and nobody liked that. So we got kicked out, murdered, massacred, and pushed out of the East and forged our way into the West, where we built up Utah. But nowadays, it's insular in a social sense. Like, we have each other, but we're out there. We're in our neighborhoods.
No, it's because anti-Mormon rule number 11 is they're always trying to co-opt other religions' scandals. And
so whose is this?
Oh, real cults. Actual cults.
Well, yeah.
Like, and this is what bothers me, because I have customers, friends, family members who lost loved ones during the Heaven's Gate cult. Remember that guy that thought there was a UFO behind Comet Hale-Bopp? I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a dude like in the late 90s.
California.
Yeah,
California
no, but it
cult.
was a big, I would think it was called the Heaven's Gate clan. I'm looking it up right now.
After watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I was like, man, you guys got a lot of dumb people out in California.
Yeah. It's called Heaven Gate.
Crap. Like,
it was a new religious movement known primarily for mass suicides committed by its members in 1997. Commonly designated a cult. It was founded in 1974 by Marshall Applewhite. And this is the crazy face that you always see whenever they try and show a cult later. It's Marshall Applewhite. But yeah, in San Diego, so on March 26, 1997, deputies of San Diego Sheriff's Department discovered the bodies of 39 active members of the group, including Applewhite, in a house in San Diego. They participated in coordinated ritual suicide. And if I remember correctly, it's because like he had prophesied that there was like a UFO behind Comet Hale-Bopp, and like it was coming to just take their spirits away. So here, take the Kool-Aid. Yikes. 39 people all at once. And it's like, yeah, that, and these groups, of course, yes, they have to be insular in order to be able to, I mean, there's actually a period where they go out and they talk a lot, but then so cults never match anything they try and apply to religion, because they actually have kind of like this weird ebb and flow to them. And that's why it requires actual professionals to study them. You don't just get to come out with pseudoscientific bite models and say, oh, my dad wasn't a good scoutmaster, so my wholesome upbringing was really abuse because of the bite model, you know? So anyway, I don't know. It's the most uninsular thing, sending out missionaries on their own dime to pay their own way in cities they were not born in or familiar with in order to share a message for free and a book they are going to give you for free. That is the exact opposite of insular. What's the antonym of insular? You're the linguist, Rachel. Insular, what? Obsessively outward facing.
Well, it's funny. I was actually laughing about how I think actually members of the church are probably less likely to marry someone from their hometown than their neighbors would be, because we are, we're connected across the world.
Yeah,
and so you go
100%.
to BYU or you go to higher education, you go to any university, and then you meet someone who's not from your hometown and you're going to marry them. And so, and I actually think Latter-day Saint marriages do better with cross-cultural marriages than your average would, because we have a shared culture. Even if, one person is from Brazil, one person from Japan, you'll find shared culture and a better success in your marriage because you have that, despite other differences in your upbringing.
I can't believe this is still called understanding Mormonism.
I know.
Like,
it's so
understanding.
tragic.
They get just like an angry ex-mo who like
he wasn't
admits,
angry.
Okay,
he
sorry.
wasn't angry.
Right. Look, I'm carrying some trauma to this conversation from having
I think
dealt with these people all week.
He's a little arrogant, I'll say. If anyone of our listeners, I know that there's a listener, we like Louise Perry. Tikla and I are always like, we are fans. If any one of our listeners knows her, has a contact with her, please message Cardin, drop a line in the Discord. We would like to get a hold of her. We would like to,
it'd be fun.
Express our perspective as believing LDS women about understanding Mormonism, especially from, one of the most interesting experiences of my life from a religious perspective was listening to a panel of modern Muslim women living in the United States talk about their actual choice experience being Muslim women. Like, they were able to walk me inside their spiritual experience. And you're never going to get that from someone on the outside of a religion critiquing it. You're just never going to be able to get access unless you're talking to someone who still believes it and can express to you why they stay, why they believe. And
okay. So last clip is outsider. Oh no, there's two. So outsider status or a life without children.
That's the one we just did.
Oh, okay. So is a life without children the last one, Tikla?
Oh no, that's a different podcast. We're not going to touch on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was just one of her other podcasts that she did recently.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Yeah, so there we have
it. Another time.
More sticky.
Yeah.
Is that the last one? More sticky?
I think it's similar, but let's try it. Let's see what was in it.
Okay, here's the last clip. More sticky.
That Mormonism has proved more sticky, at least so far. I know that there has been some, I'm sure we'll get on to this, I know there's been a drop in the fertility rate, for instance, within Mormonism. But compared to, let's say, Catholics in America, Mormonism has been much more successful at retaining people.
Mormonism catches up to trends in the broader United States about 30, 40 years late in a lot of ways. And that's been happening since the beginning. Mormonism started with polygamy, and then eventually that became socially
interesting.
No, it didn't. It started with the first vision, but okay, keep going.
Untenable, and they figured out a way to change it and to drop that part of their faith and to integrate more fully into the mainstream. Or they had institutionalized racial discrimination for the first large chunk of it.
No, they didn't. Joseph Smith was actually hammered for being an abolitionist on his presidential platform, an emancipationist, that actually wanted to give an entire territory to the freed slaves. And he himself, the first, what was it? I think 20 years they baptized all these names that are big now. Elijah Abel and countless other. They were called they were called freemen back then. Okay, but Joseph Smith was the OG of like ecumenical, come one, come all, and he's trying to say, oh, it was institutionalized racism. No, it wasn't until the Protestant curse of Cain was allowed to trickle into our church.
I would even say that the priesthood ban for the temporary priesthood ban for blacks was actually an overreaction in the other direction to being slaughtered for being too friendly. Yeah. So I think my opinion on it is that because the saints were so friendly to the slaves and then were treated so badly, it was almost like, okay, we got to focus on one thing at a time here and we need to stay alive. And so they swung all the way the other direction, and much to the detriment of the church. And it's a stain on our history, but it didn't start that way, nor was it necessarily culturally informed either way. It was kind of like a godly representation and then an overreaction based on the pressures of the society. And then we got to where we were supposed to be, hopefully, and we can continue there.
Good theory.
Okay, so I'm letting him I'm letting him keep speaking. Here we go. Tracing wood grains, telling me all the pseudo history X-Men subreddit could muster.
The mainstream, or they had institutionalized racial discrimination for the first large chunk of it, and then as the civil rights movement happened, and as more attention and more conversations and more questions started going in there, eventually they get a revelation
that Mormonism has proved.
So his answer to her question, why do we still have strong family, or her question, why do we still have strong families? Why do we still have a high fertility rate? Why are our families is our religion succeeding and growing and thriving in spite of the cultures around us failing? And his answer is, they'll catch up. They'll catch up to the cultural trends.
Spoken by a gay ex-Mormon.
I know.
Yeah.
Bless him.
He doesn't represent you. I get it. Well, the other thing too is it's like, they catch up to what? These people go woke and all of a sudden they think that, well, my team was the team that has been on the right side of history. I've shed this dogmatic past and now I'm in this position of moral authority. Shut up, dude.
Well, okay. And to his credit, he hasn't gone woke. He actually does this whole little blip about how he just couldn't find a home amongst some of that more progressive stuff. And so he acknowledges that he needs to find a community. That he realizes that that's an important, healthy part of life. And so, I just want to give the devil's due here. He could have gone off the deep end. It sounds like he's kept his life together to some extent.
How would you have answered that, Ika?
Why is it sticky?
Why are we? Yeah, why are we?
Well,
because he really, and this is where like my critique at the beginning was that he just isn't in a position to answer that question well, because he doesn't have kids. He isn't a member, like, you know what I mean? Like, he isn't perpetuating the gospel in his posterity. So like he can't speak to the mechanics and the decision making but you have kids and I have kids. And so like, why do we think it's sticking better?
So if we're talking specifically about family, like generations and generations, because there's the obvious piece where there is this incredible flood of spirit and Christianity here that's just beautiful. And I believe it to be very true. But from just like a scientific perspective, we have family structures, not just for families, but for everyone, right? So you're in a ward family. You've got so many father figures for your kids. It's insane. You've got their young men's leader. Like my son is 11. He now has a young men's leader, an entire bishopric of the best men that our community has to offer, all looking out for him, all taking him on camp outs, giving interviews periodically, which Tracing Woodgrains was painting it as this like super invasive, like these priesthood interviews with teenagers are like somehow super inappropriate. Excuse me? The like cream of the crop of masculinity in my community wants to sit down with my 11-year-old, the most annoying age that there is, and talk to him about like, how's he doing on staying honest? How's he doing
True.
on
It's very
keeping
true.
his thoughts clean and not being controlling his anger? How's he doing with safety? With he gets to sit down with this guy who doesn't have time for this, but who is volunteering to be my son's mentor and look out for him. Excuse me?
And
There is nothing healthier than that.
reinforcing the idea that our community values your patience more than your wrath. We value more your protectorship of your brother and your sister and your mother and the elderly people in your family than we do your impressive skills on the basketball or the football field. And it's like a constant reminder as a young man that like, the currency inside this chapel and amongst this people is like, okay, can you manage to provide for your family and be an emotional sounding board for those around you that need you, and
Can you take care of the widows?
Can you take care of the widows, the sick, and the afflicted? That's what makes you a man in this system, not like your 15th touchdown. Like, good job. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, good job. I'll go show up to your game. You know what I'm saying?
And we teach our young women at a very young age to value motherhood. And I didn't know this until recently. I interviewed someone who really wanted to point out that in the young men's program, they emphasize being a good husband and father. That men should be they teach young men very young to strive to a status of being a good husband and father. And so we're teaching our kids these core values of like being leaders in a home. And, you know, I mean, I think at the end of the day too, one of the answers that I would give comes back to one of the original things we were talking about, which is like really absorbing that temple story about Adam and Eve and really absorbing those truths in the temple of like why we're here. And we really do believe that like, yeah, we want to develop our talents and yeah, we want to be successful and yeah, we want to but we are here to like have children. We are here to like get married and have kids. And not everybody gets to be married and not everybody gets to have kids, but that is still one of the ideal ambitions of coming to Earth. Even though like, you know, families are, you know, we can, you know, families are made in different shapes and sizes, yes. But someone still does have to have the kids. You know what I mean? Like someone like that's someone still has to do the hard work of having the kids, and it's really hard. And I think
it's an honored
that we're
sacrifice
still,
here.
And I think there is something to be said about we still praise mothers for the work that they do. We still praise fathers for the work that they do in our culture. So, you know, I think that's why you and I and Charlotte, who's also on WardRadio Women, talk about fertility rates and having kids is because we also do recognize that there is a kind of secular pressure coming towards us as a culture that says like, oh, so sad she sold herself short. She just didn't get her PhD. She decided to get married and have kids. What a waste. You know, we recognize that kind of pressure is coming into our culture as well.
Yeah. Well, and there's one other thought I had on this that I'll bring up just here at the end. And that was that just kind of critically thinking, like, what are some of the reasons that this works so well? And I realized some of this high demand stuff that we're doing is actually scheduled stillness. So like when I go to church on Sunday, when I go to the temple to worship, I have scheduled still time where I am aligning myself spiritually. And I'm opening my mind to really think big picture for a minute. Really think about what actually matters to me. And my experience is that after I have those meditative moments that are scheduled into my life on the Sabbath and on the days I choose to attend the temple, I come out with a renewed perspective on what's most important to me. And it's often realigned from how I went in. When I went in, I was bothered by all of the outside noises and the voices. I'm spending too much time on my phone. I'm not spending enough time in peaceful things. And then I come out realizing, oh my goodness, the most important thing is right in front of me. It's my husband and it's my kids and it's my God, obviously. And so I think having that built-in time to really think about what you want, what's really important to you, actually really centers you. to be able to do the right hard thing in the short term that will benefit the most people in your life and those around you and your family and ultimately yourself. And so if you're just in the rat race all the time, you're busy, and you don't take that time to slow down, then you might miss your dreams because you didn't think of them soon enough. And so anyway, another thought, this high demand religion actually is a lot of stillness. A lot of stillness.
I'm putting that
was amazing.
into the intro. That was
amazing.
Really good. You just made that into the intro. So
should we do the outro in a
and the
Louise Perry
ASMR?
voice?
Yes. That's true.
Very ASMR.
If she comes in, I'm going to just randomly, I'm going to have a spreadsheet of like 10 phrases that I want her to just say. You're just like,
oh my goodness,
welcome to the Ellis household. You know?
Did you guys see the Mormoner meditation video where it was like affirmations for Latter-day Saints? And it was like,
no,
so
oh my gosh.
Did you see it?
I
We
know.
have to pull it up. It's so funny.
I am looking this up right now. You see, it's on
was
Mormon.
like,
was it a spoof or was it real?
Oh, it was definitely satire. So, but it was like a lovely woman's voice saying these things like I can't remember. The comment you made in Sunday school about archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon was tasteful and appropriate. Or like the people in the pews behind you didn't mind that your child threw Cheerios at them. It was just so funny. So hilarious.
Funny.
You have to find it. Where is it?
Okay, so I'm going to Mormoner right now, and what's funny is I'll have to edit this out, but every time I search for Mormons at Affirmation, it keeps on pulling up the video, Meet the Mormons at Affirmation, which is the LGBTQ center in Provo.
Oh, funny.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if I go to mormoner.org, which is totally hilarious.
I think I found it.
Boom.
Latter-day Saint Affirmations. That text you sent counts as ministering. If they need anything, they will let you know. Your comment about Book of Mormon geography in Sunday school was insightful and added to the discussion. Coffee is gross anyways. It's fine that you don't like it. Your personal anecdote during your testimony did bring the message back to Christ. Eventually.
Eventually? Oh, that is so bad.
Everyone loved your joke at the Linger Longer. You are the funniest guy in the Elders Quorum presidency. People were really impressed when you sang the harmony part in that hymn. Way to go.
I'm gonna be sick. This is so funny.
So
Johnny Lingo is not racist.
Oh gosh.
Okay, last one.
It wasn't uncomfortable for anyone when you read your patriarchal blessing in sacrament meeting.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is genius.
That's so good. It's comedic
This
gold.
only has 176 views?
Oh, that must be a mistake. I think I've listened to it that many times.
Oh my gosh, look at this. 176 views from 4 weeks ago. That is it?
That can't be right.
Dude,
I wonder if they
looking right
reposted
at
it.
Yeah, maybe, but even the repost should be getting more than that. That's funny. All right.
So funny.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I guess just that are all the bases covered. We done here.
I think we did it.
This was quite fun. Tikla, Cardin, Rachel, that was this was fun. This was fun.
That was a fun one.
I enjoyed this.
All right. Well, let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Louise Perry, we're huge fans of yours. Just not quite sure that last casting decision, you know what I'm saying, hit the mark, shall we say.
You know, I think it was her last one before maternity leave, so we'll give her a break.
Yeah,
she might have been really pregnant and
She
not thinking
deserved it.
clearly. Next go around, she's back. She's back from maternity leave, and I think we'll get an actual Latter-day Saint this time. That's what I'm hoping.
That would be totally awesome. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. And as always, for this and more, please check us out at WardRadio.com.
Can't keep quiet when you start a riot.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We assume if you made it this far that you liked our content. So please make sure that you smash that like button and you share this video with your friends. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet to our channel, please make sure that you subscribe and you press the alert button so you receive alerts on every one of our daily uploads. Now, we want to make sure that we keep all of this content flowing for free to you, the viewer. And to do that, we need your help. If you're a person of means, please consider a direct contribution through Venmo or through Zelle. And the links to those platforms will be in the description as well. Also, if you want to help us out, please make sure you buy some of our merch. We got really cool hats, really cool t-shirts for both boy and girl viewers, all available on WardRadio.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our Ward Radio newsletter. You can receive all the really great Ward Radio news directly in your inbox simply by putting your email address in WardRadio.com. And finally, if you guys want to help out purchasing some of the equipment in the studio, you can always check out our Amazon wish list that is also available in the description of this video. And either way, whether you're pressing this button here to make sure you're subscribed to our channel, or whether you're watching another video here just because you like our stuff, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next program.